Good evening, viewers. Thank you for joining us in Navabharat e-conclave. Today, we have with us Dr. Mohan Joshi, Dean, Sayan Hospital, Dr. Hemant Deshmukh, Dean, Seth GS Medical College and KEM Hospital, Dr. Milind Navalakhe, Professor, Senior Consultant, ENT Surgeon, Global Hospital. Dr. Sanjeev Badwar, Consultant and Head, Department of ENT, Kokilaben Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital and Medical Research Institute. Dr. Mazda Turel, Consultant, Neuro and Spine Surgeon, Wokhad Hospital. And Dr. Ravi Kiran Vernekar, ENT Consultant and Head and Neck Surgery Consultant, Dr. LH Hiranandani Hospital. Good evening, doctors, and a very warm welcome to you. I, Vivek, will be your host. Welcome to the webinar organized by Navabharat Media Group on the topic COVID and related secondary infections. Dr. Joshi is a surgeon by profession and is currently Dean of Lokmanya Tilak General Hospital, also known as Sayan Hospital, closely monitoring and running the hospital handling COVID patients. Dr. Mohan Joshi was earlier the Dean of Nair Hospital and was also in charge of Coronavirus Isolation Center at Seven Hills Hospital, Marur. Dr. Hemant Deshmukh, an MD in Radiology, is currently Dean of Seth JS Medical College and KEM Hospital. An experienced professor with a demonstrated history of working in hospital and healthcare industry, skilled in clinical research, medical education, and endovascular procedures. Strong professional with a passion for developing and innovating unique medical devices. Dr. Milind Navalakhe is a senior consultant, ENT surgeon at Global Hospital, Parel, Mumbai. He is heading India's first mucormycosis clinic at Global Hospital, Mumbai. He has experience in treating mucormycosis cases since more than 25 years. In the current pandemic situation, Dr. Milind Navalakhe, along with his team, is seamlessly treating and managing multiple advanced cases of mucormycosis patients successfully. At present, more than 25 patients are admitted for the same at Global Hospital. Additionally, he is professor at Department of ENT, Seth GS Medical College and KEM Hospital, Mumbai. Dr. Sanjeev Badwar, Head Department of ENT and Head Neck Robotic Surgery, Kokilaben Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital and Medical Research Institute. His area of expertise consists of head, neck, robotic surgery, cochlear implant surgery, sleep apnea surgery, laryngoscopy and phonosurgery, etc. He is MBBS from Armed Forces Medical College, Pune, and an MS ENT, Mumbai University, 1991. He has also specialized in head and neck surgical oncology in Tata Memorial Hospital in the year 2000. Dr. Mazda Turel has completed his MBBS Grant Medical College and Sir JJ Hospitals, Mumbai, and a master's in neurosurgery at Christian Medical College, Vellore. He is currently a consultant surgeon at Wokhad Hospital. His core competencies are not one but a vast array of surgical excellence, including the simplest to most complex brain and spine surgeries. Dr. Ravi Kiran Vernekar is a consultant in Department of ENT and Head and Neck Surgery since October 2010 at Dr. Hiranandani Hospital. After completing his post-graduation, he joined Goa Medical College after receiving specialized training in the ear surgery. He underwent training under world-renowned ENT surgeon Dr. A. Mahadevaiah. He also has a very high success rate in treating patients with headache, especially sinus headache and allergic conditions of nose. Apart from conventional ENT surgeries, he has good experience in functional endoscopic sinus surgery, voice-related surgery, and microscopic ear surgery. Let us now move to the question and answer session. I will open questions to everyone in the panel. Whoever feels free can speak on the same. What is this new issue related to black fungus, white fungus, yellow fungus, and so on? I am sure this was there from time before, but it has gained relevant importance in this pandemic. So, what is this new issue? Can you elaborate, sir?
Okay, I'll take this. You see, so basically, uh, this is a misnomer. The black fungus actually is not a black fungus. Basically, its effects on the tissues cause destruction and a blackish discoloration. But the species of black fungus is something else. But there's a lot of hype about this. So it's important to clarify that, yes, this condition was seen earlier too, but maybe in all tertiary care hospitals, we would see 3 or 4 cases in a year, mainly in diabetics, immune compromised patients. But this year has been a deluge. Like you mentioned, all over the city, all our hospitals have seen a deluge of such patients who are suffering from what is called mucormycosis. And all of us would like to stick to the technical terms because it's creating a lot of confusion among the lay public when you talk of black, white, and now yellow. So essentially, this is mucormycosis, which is being seen now for various causes, which we shall talk about later.
Anyone else wants to say something on the same?
Can I add something?
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
we start with mucormycosis, and as you were speaking about yellow fungus and white fungus, we actually scientifically term them as candidiasis and aspergillosis are also fungi which can affect any person or any patient who has reduced immunity in him. And by and large, we have seen a lot of cases of aspergillosis, and especially aspergillosis in tuberculous cavities who have been there for a long time. Chronic tuberculosis, treated tuberculosis, cavitatory tuberculosis, and what forms inside the cavitation is a mass of aspergillosis. And we have seen patients with aspergillosis coming to us with massive hemoptysis, that is bleeding from the lungs. And we have treated aspergillosis with hemoptysis with bronchial artery embolization. So that was our mainstay of treating aspergillosis, not only with antifungal agents, but blocking the artery supplying the lung, as well as injecting methylene blue inside the cavity to arrest this kind of aspergillosis causing hemoptysis.
Anyone else would like to add on this, sir? Sir, I believe this was there for some long time, but it has gained relevant importance in today's pandemic scenario. Like, can somebody elaborate why it has happened like this?
Yeah, can I take? Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, Dr. Milind.
Uh, yeah, the mucormycosis has been there since many years. In fact, when I was resident during that time also we had cases, and slowly, in 2015 or 16 also we had about 20-30 cases a year. The diabetics who have lower immunity and have uncontrolled blood sugar used to get this. Now, in this, the COVID has added to it in compromising the immunity further. Either these patients are already diabetic, or COVID has caused disturbance in their blood sugar and they become diabetic, which they usually patient would not accept that he is a diabetic, but the fact is after COVID they become diabetic at least for some time. And this decrease in immunity causes the mucormycosis.
So basically, it is also because immunity is generally down when you are suffering from COVID, and also because of some medicines that are being given to
Yes.
treat COVID probably causes increase in diabetic level and lowering the immunity.
Yes, the use of steroids,
Yeah.
especially if it is in the initial period of COVID, which sometimes it's not indicated, or used in higher doses than indicated. And that is what I have seen in patients now, especially after we started getting this patient even in first wave, but there were not so many. And in the second wave, as you see that they have increased. So we have noticed that all of them have received some amount of steroids. A very few number would be without steroids, and just because of diabetes, they have got mucormycosis now.
Sir, I have another question. We have seen that the medical protocol to treat COVID has changed over a period of time. During the first phase, the treatment was something else. Now, probably it is understood better, and the treatment has changed to a lot of extent. Now, what is the medical protocol being followed today, and how does it differ from the treatment little earlier, even in the second phase and also in the first phase? So, what are the difference in protocol, medical protocol that is being followed?
See, COVID is basically it's a viral infection, so there is no set treatment for that. It is only basically a conservative treatment to treat the underlying condition of the patient. So basically, a lot of medications have come. Remdesivir has been given. So HCQ was there initially. Ivermectin has been considered. Then came doxycycline. Initially, even azithromycin was given. So almost all the medicines, most of the medicines have been tried in this condition. But we need to understand that they are not the proven treatment for them. So that these medicines in no way act. Only thing is generally because in some centers they have seen by giving such medicines, they have seen the reduction in mortality, or the probably the stay of patient in the hospital is less, recovery is better. So based on these findings, it has been suggested. But actually the treatment, even for that matter, plasma, even initially, even plasma therapy was recommended. So eventually even that has been withdrawn now. So we need to understand that there is no particular treatment for this. It is only to give to get a stability in the patients. They are all symptomatic treatments. Only steroid has been the only medication that is actually you can consider as a treatment. But that has to be given under monitoring. Like sir said, see, continuous steroid or without monitoring, if you use steroid, it can lead into sudden surge in high blood sugar. And that is the common cause. A patient may not have been diabetic throughout his life. He may be a mid-age patient who has never tested his diabetes, or he would never had any symptoms of diabetes. Suddenly, there is a surge of sugar from 120 to it can go up to 300. So this is that is the only disadvantage of steroid. Otherwise, right now what we see is steroid is the only treatment, and oxygen has to be given, obviously because of the low reduction in the oxygen saturation. And obviously other antibiotics are given to prevent secondary infection. It is not a primary treatment for the COVID. It is to prevent secondary infection, be it pneumonia or any other septicemic infection if the patient suffers. To prevent basically secondary infections, other medications are given.
Sir, please, Dr. Sanjeev.
Yeah, the only change as per the current recommendations which have come in is one, plasma therapy has been dropped. And now the role of immune modulating drugs like the oral baricitinib and tocilizumab has been proven. And it is used either alone or in combination with steroids. The use of anticoagulants, because we know that this disease interferes with the vascular system, and the use of anticoagulants, initially when the patients are in hospital, they're given Fragmin or Clexane, and on discharge, either Ecosprin or something like Xarelto. So the use of anticoagulants, the judicious use of steroids, the use of immune modulators where deemed necessary if the patient is likely to go in for a storm. The other new thing is recently launched the use of the antibody cocktail, which has been marketed by Roche. But this is recommended in symptomatic patients after 3 to 4 days of symptoms, those who are deemed at high risk and not admitted to the hospital. So these are early days yet. We have to see the effect of this medicine in our country, but these are the changes which are coming in. And the other thing is judicious monitoring of the patient, monitoring all the parameters, watching out for coagulopathies, watching out for bacterial infections. These things are important.
I will add a certain few more observations. One is a lot of patients come with acute myocardial infarction. These are all blood vessel related episodes. And what was most important during the first and the second wave was a lot of patients actually came with MI, that is myocardial infarct. A lot of patients came with peripheral vascular disease. A lot of patients came with ischemic stroke. And not to forget, a lot of patients actually succumb to pulmonary embolism also. And most of these patients with pulmonary embolism had some kind of acute DVT also.
Sir, I also have some little understanding what I gathered from the protocol change that has happened. Is it true that, and I have also gone through the same issue. I was also COVID positive some time back. Dr. Mohan Joshi helped me in that, in getting me what I am right now. I mean, he was the one who gave me the medicines, and so I need to understand this if I am correct. Whenever somebody gets COVID positive, he has to wait for say 3 or 4 days. 90% of the people get okay. 10 or 15% of the people who develop higher fevers are then basically they have to test for all the cytokines, and if their cytokines shower has started, they have to take COVID, steroids and maybe anticoagulants to reduce the cytokine shower and not allow it to develop into a storm. Is that now the protocol now? So, and then later on, to prevent the secondary infections, you probably start with all the antibiotics that we were taking before, like azithromycin and doxycycline and all others. Is this now the protocol?
See,
Yes,
now
yes,
anybody
again.
who is now the COVID virus is a respiratory virus. And as long as the COVID positivity means what, that we are able to see the virus which is in the respiratory tract, nasopharynx, oropharynx, etc. So the positivity does not mean that the virus has invaded your lungs. The concern comes when the virus has migrated to your lungs and starts injuring your lung tissue. And this virus releases inflammatory markers, what are called as, there are multiple inflammatory markers which are postulated. And when these inflammatory markers, which are chemicals, actually biochemicals, they start releasing in the lungs, then the lung tissue starts getting damaged. That is the problem. And when the lung tissue starts getting damaged, we as surgeon, you will realize that a man can live or a patient can live without one lung, because we remove on many occasions 50% of the lung, or one lung we remove out of two, and the patient still lives very comfortably with little bit morbidity. But now when it happens that this virus starts injuring and more than 50% of the lung has gone away, that means that there starts the critical situation of the patient, and the aim is to stop these inflammatory markers or competitively inhibit them or prevent their action on the lung tissue. So whatever drugs we are targeting today, one is that something which is virostatic or virucidal. The second thing is to prevent damage to the lung by inflammatory markers, or inflammatory biochemicals. So our therapy, one aim is to reduce the viral burden, so give remdesivir, flavipiravir, and several other antiviral drugs. The other thing is to prevent the injury to the lung. And the third thing is to promote the injury, the repair of the lung, by giving certain non-specific medicine, which includes vitamins, immunoboosters, etc., etc. So this is the crux of the pathology and the crux of the treatment. And when lung is damaged, naturally your oxygenation suffers, because the oxygen diffusion is occurring at the alveolo-capillary interface. That means that from the lungs, the oxygen is going to the RBCs at the alveolo-capillary interface. And when that gets injured, that gets affected, the oxygenation suffers and the organ damage starts, or the tissue damage starts, the system damage starts, etc., etc. So this is what you need to understand about the COVID problems, and the things are evolving around this pathology.
Shall we go to the next question then?
Yes, please.
Sir, it is felt that most of the pneumonia is caused by secondary infections, etc., due to low immunity in COVID patients. and because of, as we discussed, the use of steroids. So as such, the antibiotic which initially, like a month back or maybe 2-3 months back, it was advised to start antibiotics at the start of the COVID. Now it is being given at after the treatment of steroid has been done. If of course, if somebody is seriously ill. So I mean, giving it in the initial phase, in the start of the infection, did it have any wrong effect on the patient?
No. Can I talk again? See, if you give antibiotics before the bacterial infection has occurred, it is called as prophylactic antibiotics. And when the infection has already occurred, then it is called as, and when you are treating it, it is called as therapeutic antibiotics. Actually, all the books say that prophylactic antibiotics may not be given. So wait for the infection to develop. But this is something which is theoretical, which is to be said practically. When a person is likely to be diabetic, when a person is likely to have injury, viral injury in the lung, when the lungs are going to be damaged, and when there is a definite source or definitely likelihood that somebody will suffer by bacterial infection because of high sugars and immunocompression or immunosuppression, then practically, if the patient is my father, mother, wife, child, I would start the antibiotics at onset. There are some postulations that if you start the antibiotics at onset, the antibiotics will have their own effect, side effects, etc. But you would like to prevent infection in a situation where the patient is likely to get infected almost 100%. So therefore, practically as a surgeon, we would always start, but some people would theoretically say that this may not be done. Wait till the WBC counts rise. But on many occasions, we have seen in COVID patients that the WBC counts may not rise because that person is immunosuppressed. Cell-mediated immunity and humoral immunity both are suppressed. So therefore, we do not see that kind of leukemoid reaction, which otherwise in a normal person we would see, and we would not see even that kind of fever, which we would see in a normal person. So therefore, it is always sensible to start. However, theoretically, it is not sensible and it is not right. But practically, everybody would start. I think that Dr. Milind and others will agree with me. Is it?
Yes.
Sir, how effective is the vaccine today as we see that the strains are mutating, and the strain that right now is affecting people in India, that is B1617, how effective are the two COVID vaccines that we are right giving, Covaxin and Covishield? Could you hear me, sir?
We are seeing infections even in patients who have got vaccination, even after maybe after first dose, and we are seeing infections happening in patients even after second dose. So effectiveness of vaccination may be seen from 2 points. One thing is as a prevention of infection, and second thing is as a possibility to reduce the the severity of the infection. So definitely, across the country and probably all the ICU setup, definitely, what is said is that whoever has received vaccination, their condition is not as worse as people who are presenting and who have not taken vaccination. So definitely, vaccination is effective and it helps. That is, and percentage wise, I am not sure how much it is, but I think anybody else can
Yeah.
say about that.
So actually, WHO had done a study as late as 17th March of this year. So they've come up with some very interesting figures. So firstly, overall efficacy of all vaccines, be it Covishield, Covaxin, Pfizer, Moderna, they vary from 70 to 90% plus. As regards the B1617 variant, the Covishield efficacy is above 60%, Pfizer 88%, and overall efficacy of Pfizer is rated at 95%, Moderna 94%, the Russian vaccine 90%, the J&J single shot vaccine at 67%. So by and large, if you see overall, most vaccines do offer some kind of protection from varying from 70 to 90% plus. As Dr. Ravi mentioned, we have to endorse the vaccines. We have to encourage all our countrymen to come forward and take the vaccines because that is the only way out. Prevention is better than cure. And it has been seen that the use of the vaccines does help in preventing severe infections, does help in preventing mortality. And there are hard figures from researchers worldwide to endorse this.
Shall we go to the next question, sir?
Yes, please.
How fatal is the black fungus infection in people down with COVID, and what are the medical protocols that the doctors are following to cure this infection?
Yeah, Milind, go ahead, please.
So I would like to call it as a broad term as mucormycosis rather than black fungus, which is, as Dr. Sanjeev said, is the correct terminology. And when we are talking about the effects, definitely if it is not treated, the mortality which you are asking about is very high. But when treated well in time, that's very important that we start the treatment early. If we start the treatment early and a combination of surgery and medical treatment in a right way would definitely decrease the mortality rate. Like we start with medical treatment, then take them for surgical debridement and remove all the affected parts, and then again continue with the medical treatment, which goes on for a long time, for about 4 weeks to 8 weeks, injectable, and then oral. So by this, we have been able to control the mortality rate, keep it very, very low.
So I would just like to add, we need to highlight to the lay public that mucormycosis is a medical emergency, number one. Number two, this is time sensitive. That is what we would like to highlight through this forum. Every day you delay treatment, say for a week, the case fatality jumps from 35 to 40% to as high as 66%. As my colleague Dr. Milind said, it is extremely important, one, to have a high index of suspicion, diagnose it early, intervene early with what is called, because you see, there's so many surgical procedures which can be done. So in today's day and age, we call it targeted, adequate surgical resection, followed by medical management, which has two phases, the intensive phase, which can go on for 4 to 6 weeks, and the maintenance phase, and continuous monitoring to be done very carefully. By doing this in all centers, we managed to salvage a fair number of patients. Even in our hospital right now, we have about 35 odd patients with mucor. And in the private sector, if this is happening, I can imagine what is happening with our colleagues in the government sector. They are deluged. So the idea is to intervene early, diagnose early, targeted surgery and medical management. You can salvage this. So that should be the carry-home message.
In KEM Hospital, what we have devised is definitely a multi-speciality care of mucormycosis patients. The ownership of the patient lies with the physician, and it's a multidisciplinary team of ENT surgeons, the neurosurgeons, as well as the ophthalmic surgeons, that each and every multi-speciality specialist will always and every day see the patient on a day-to-day basis, so that any kind of clinical deterioration or any kind of improvement in the medicines can be managed by all the three specialties along with the physician himself. So the ownership of the patient has to be with one person. So multiple specialties have to advise a combined surgery. The patient has to be operated in a single OT rather than multiple anesthesia episodes or multiple surgeries. I think a single place or a single OT where everybody can come together and devise a single plan for the benefit of the patient is going to be the best option right now.
That's a very good point, sir. And that's the same protocol followed in all hospitals. Like in our hospital, the director of our team is our infectious diseases specialist. She guides us regarding the management, and we always work together in that. And like Dr. Milind has started a specific clinic at Global. Likewise, at Kokilaben, we have what is called a mucor response team, which starts from the accident and emergency. When the patient comes in, a triage is done, staging is done, and everyone chips in. But like you said, ownership is extremely important. You have to have one person who directs all of us to do our job.
सर ये म्यूकोमाइकोसिस में इसमें सिम्टम्स क्या रहते हैं पेशेंट को, कैसे पता चले पेशेंट्स को कि उनको ये ब्लैक फंगस की बीमारी हुई है, या अगर सपोज कोई घर में ट्रीटमेंट ले रहा हो सकता है वहां पर भी उनको ये प्रॉब्लम आए, तो हाउ विल दे आइडेंटिफाई व्हाट आर द सिम्टम्स?
Mucormycosis, as such, initially we were getting cases after about 2 to 4 weeks of getting COVID. But now recently, what is the trend in last 2 weeks, that we have started getting patients as early as 4 to 6 days also after getting a COVID infection, which is quite surprising. Now, what are the symptoms? The symptoms starts very simple. They would get a little numbness over the face, numbness of cheek, sometimes severe eye pain, severe headache, dental pain, loosening of the tooth is a little at later stage, and obviously swelling of the eyeball, ulcer on the palate, and decreased vision. These are later stages. And if we talk of advanced symptoms, then once it is intracranial, then convulsions or unconsciousness.
Dr. Mazda, you have been treating. You are a neurosurgeon by profession. So, does this problem of black fungus or mucormycosis, does it affect even brains?
While more often than not, it is a spread from the nose, nasal cavity into the eye or into the skull base. And it's a direct progression of that. And we work with our ENT colleagues here at Wokhad as a team. Like everybody says, this is a team approach. And very often we see orbital involvement. We may have to exenterate the eye. Very often we see that the skull base is destroyed, and we may have to go in and do a craniotomy and debride. See here, this kind of disease does not require a cosmetic procedure. It requires a mass debulking procedure. You have to eradicate as much disease as is possible. Several patients we have seen who are presenting as their first symptom as a stroke. We have seen 3 patients who presented with cavernous sinus thrombosis as the first symptom. Without nasal discharge, without bleeding from the nose, without facial symptoms, which is the most typical manifestation, like sir mentioned. But very few patients. Yesterday, we saw a patient who presented with a pituitary apoplexy, pituitary hemorrhage, severe sinusitis with erosion of the skull base and pituitary hemorrhage. And and we are also seeing mucor, isolated mucor. We have seen 2 patients in whom, in the posterior fossa, with no real relation to the nasal sinuses, patient has been explored for a posterior fossa abscess or a lesion, and it's turned out to be mucor. So it's like how COVID presents with so many varied manifestations. Mucor is also presenting with very, very varied. While 70 to 80% of patients are following a typical course, we are seeing very atypical presentations as well. So isolated stroke, isolated cavernous sinus thrombosis, isolated posterior fossa lesions are also, even though uncommon, we are seeing them. And that is why I think a neurosurgeon being on the team is also a helpful addition to take this forward.
I would agree with you, doctor, because we at our center too, we've had to operate 2 patients with pituitary apoplexy secondary to mucor. So, like when we started this discussion, it's a learning process for all of us, be it medical management, be it surgery. You're seeing something new every day. So you have to keep an open mind. And just when the patient comes to you, you have to have all options ready. So the team has to be in place.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. It's truly a multidisciplinary approach, and nobody really knows much, because every day the scenario is changing. Like Dr. Navlakha himself said that it's a dynamic process, and we're all learning on the ball.
I think we are the first to start with. We have created a code muker group. You have code blues in the have a code muker group. So all the protocols are decided as soon as the patient comes in. The patient details are put on the group. The radiologist knows what is to be done. The ophthalmologist knows. Anesthetist knows, and you don't have to keep on calling up everybody and coordinating. And that is working out very well. And earliest we have got patient on table after coming is about 10 hours. Patient was on table, diagnosed and on table and operated and recovering quite well. So, it's the speed with which you work, coordinated and obviously led by one person, and then the other team follows. So I think that if that is followed at most of the hospitals, I think everybody would get a good survival rate, I think, decreasing the mortalities.
I think in our city
माइकोसिस तो काफी सालों से है. आई थिंक जैसे आपने कहा जब आप रेसिडेंट थे तब से है, तो ऐसा मतलब कितना फर्क पड़ गया दैट अभी इतनी जोर से वो उभर कर आ रहा है, जबकि जैसे पहले भी तो कोई कारणों से स्टेरॉइड दिया जाता था इन लाइफ थ्रेटनिंग केसेस, तो इम्यूनिटी पहले भी डाउन होती थी, लेकिन अभी ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है कि अब एकदम तेजी से उभर कर आ रहा है, जबकि ये डिजीज काफी पुराना है.
ये disease सबसे पहले, just for a matter of this thing, was first described in 1876 by somebody called Farbinger in Germany. So ये इतनी पुरानी है. And like all of you know, we've been treating mucor cases all these years. But why now? So there are various postulations to this. One, of course, a lowered immunity, both because of COVID and because of the use of steroids, sometimes not judicious. The nature of the disease itself, because when we go in and see, there's a healthy demarcation between affected and tissue which is not affected by mucor. So there is necrosis, there is what is called angioinvasion. Like doctor mentioned earlier, a lot of patients are coming in with gangrene of the foot, with myocardial infarction, with strokes. So the local tissue damage takes place because of angioinvasion. There is thrombosis out there, tissue death takes place, and the environment has rich iron, ferritin. So mucor thrives in this. So yes, people have been treated with steroids earlier, long time without so much of deleterious effects, but now, one, because of COVID per se, which lowers your immunity, two, because of its local effect, angioinvasion, three, because of the variant, four, because of steroids. All these factors have come together to produce what we are seeing right now.
Sir, क्या ये early stage में?
I would say what?
Dr. Milind.
Yes, why so many patients? Because if you take across, suppose 1,000 patients, 1,000 normal people, you would find one person with lower immunity. But the pandemic has decreased the immunity of masses, and that is the only reason what we could see that instead of 1 in 1,000, you are getting 10 in 1,000. That's because of the lower immunity group has increased. There's nothing else other than that which we see.
But sir, Dr. Milind, lower immunity group तो उनको ही होगी जिनको कोरोना का इन्फेक्शन माइल्ड या असिम्प्टोमेटिक या सीवियर हुआ है. जो लोग अफेक्टेड नहीं है उनकी इम्यूनिटी तो डाउन नहीं होगी.
बराबर है.
तो मतलब आपका कहना है कि क्योंकि इन्फेक्शन रेट बहुत हाई है, इसलिए लार्ज नंबर ऑफ पॉपुलेशन आर ईदर माइल्डली इन्फेक्टेड और मॉडरेटली इन्फेक्टेड और सीवियरली इन्फेक्टेड, एंड इनमें वो म्यूकर माइकोसिस होने की संभावना बढ़ जाती है.
We have been seeing cases who have just been home quarantined, never admitted, never got oxygen, got steroid just for a day. So basically, COVID has decreased the immunity of a lot of people. That is why you are seeing so many patients at a time.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Even mild cases of COVID we have seen have not taken oxygen, minimal doses of steroids. They are coming with Nuker. So it is the disease per se which is lowering the immunity. You can't blame any one factor. Like the treatment is multimodality, the causes are also many.
See, COVID as a virus, it also affects the one of the defense mechanism, that is a neutrophil. It causes neutropenia, and once the neutrophil count is affected, neutrophil is very important cell which defends the body against mucor. So once COVID affects that, so automatically the defense mechanism is disturbed. So that is also in one way the immune system is affected. So it is not in general population, the COVID affected cases only.
सर ये क्या ये ऑक्सीजन आईसीयू में अगर जो लोग ऑक्सीजन पर हैं क्या ये ऑक्सीजन मास्क से भी हो सकता है? Does the use of modified oxygen help? Or yeah, cleaning the masks with maybe using distilled water or not using tap water, will that also make a difference?
All these are theories of causes, which has been postulated, but nothing has been proved. We can't blame one factor. As we already, and Dr. Sanjeev also said that we are getting varied patients with very mild symptoms, no oxygen. So we can't have only one factor which I see in all the patients, that all of them have high HbA1c. So sometime or the other in last 3 months, their blood sugars have been very high. HbA1c, that
blood sugar level.
Yeah, but HbA1c average of 3 months. That we find that all of them have it higher.
So I just like
तो क्या ये people who are having problem of diabetes इनमें ज्यादा हो रहा है या जनरली? देखिए स्टेरॉइड लेने से इम्यूनिटी डाउन होती है, प्लस आई थिंक शुगर लेवल बढ़ जाता है. तो इज इट अ कंबाइंड फैक्टर और केवल शुगर लेवल बढ़ने से भी ये हो सकता है?
No, Mr. Vivek Prasad, it is a combined factor both way. See, ordinarily fungi love to be in a diabetic patient, and they love to be in a damp environment or which is wet, something which is moist. So they love to grow there. So both the things contribute. One is the immunity, which is going down by corticosteroids, and the corticosteroids inducing high sugar levels. So both the factors are responsible for this, and this is a postulated mechanism that since we are giving a wet oxygen, because if you give dry oxygen, you get encrustation tracheobronchitis, which is because of dryness, and the secretions which are there, humidification which is there in the respiratory passage will get affected. So therefore, we always give humidified oxygen, or what is called as wet oxygen. The oxygen passes through a sterile water. But now, of course, that when patient is, and the second thing, which is very important in this particular group of patients which are COVID, is that we give oxygen with pressure. We give oxygen, 60 liters of oxygen with 5 atmospheric pressure or 10 pressure like that, or, NIV with 10 PEEP or whatever. So we are giving a lot of pressure. So under pressure, all the things which are going up, So therefore, anything which is there for 15 days, the bottle is not changed. There is a postulation that there is likely to be fungal growth, or this damp, moist, wet oxygen can create a good background for fungus to live. And this is what is the scenario. So therefore, putting sterile water comes in, again and again, re-sterilize the bottle. But this is bound to happen. I mean, whatever care we do and we take, it can happen. So this is what is important.
सर ये ब्लैक फंगस या ये बीमारी अगर किसी को होती है, तो अगर ये अर्ली स्टेज में या स्टार्ट लेवल में पता चल जाता है, तो व्हाट आर द केसेस ऑफ द पेशेंट गेटिंग क्योर्ड कंप्लीटली?
As I told you, as early you come, as early the patient comes and as early the intervention is done, that way the survival rate is better. It is proved that if patient reaches to you in on first 2 or 3 days, and you start the treatment with medical lines, surgical treatment, uh, the mortality. So you can understand at what speed it increases. I can always compare it for the patient's understanding to a very rapidly progressing cancer. So you need to, be more aggressive in the treatment, very fast in the treatment. Everything should be available, like medical treatment, surgical treatment. All options should be readily available to the patient to start with. And like in any type of cancer, you have to go surgically much beyond the margin. You have to get clear margins for clearance of the disease. Just clearing a little bit of disease is not going to help, and that is how we are now getting more complex cases of 2 times, 3 times surgery done. And then they come because, maybe the inadequate removal or the aggressiveness of the disease is such, even the surgeon has removed, somewhere the medical line of treatment either was not available or not given properly. And that is why, it progresses.
सर ये म्यूकरमाइकोसिस केस में कितने परसेंटेज ऑफ द पेशेंट्स रिक्वायर सर्जिकल इंटरवेंशन और कितने लोग को ओरल मेडिसिन से हो सकती है ट्रीट?
It is 100% requires surgery. All of them require surgery. Surgical clearance of the mucosa is the must. Medical treatment is also a must. So that is why the treatment is medicine, surgery, medicine, surgery. So you have to keep on doing that. And in between, do a diagnostics, nasal endoscopies, do radiological investigation, do a CT scan, MRI, see whether you have any additional lesions. Keep a track of that. Keep serial data of all your CT scans, MRIs, and find out if it is increasing. Immediately go in and again debride, and then step up your combination therapy. In the medical therapy also, we don't depend on one antifungal. Depending on one antifungal, you are risking too much, because if there is a renal problem, then if you are giving only amphotericin B and then you stop in between and you start another antifungal, to gain the plasma level of that drug will take another 2-3 days. That means practically that patient is without antifungal for next 2-3 days when you stop amphotericin B. So from day one, from my team, Dr. Vasant Nagarwekar would always start with 2, or if it is very aggressive disease, 3 antifungals, and slowly as the patient progresses or has some complication, then stop one of the antifungals if required.
That is a very important point which Dr. Milind has made. The use of antifungals in combination has two points. One, because now you're not certain about the availability of certain drugs. And if you don't have any particular drug, at least the other one is available, so therapy can continue. But the second point is that we are also getting a mixed flora, different type of fungus together. So by using a combination, you're sure that you've covered the entire spectrum. So like I said, you need an experienced physician to guide you, because we are all basically surgeons working with them, and we have to work in tandem, and we're learning every day.
So as we are getting different type of fungus, each fungus has each antifungal has more potency against particular fungus. So if I start with one antifungal and find that no, along with mucormycosis, there is also aspergillus which is grown after 8 days, and I had not started isoconazole, or I had not started posaconazole. So it becomes a problem that you need to add later on, and already there is a other type of fungus which is growing inside. So there are patients who have 2 or 3 type of fungus grown on the culture.
सर तो पेशेंट्स को कोई क्लिनिकल टेस्ट अवेलेबल है क्या कोविड होने के बाद? इनको ये टेस्ट फंगल का टेस्ट कर लेना चाहिए, या आई मीन दे शुड वेट फॉर द डिजीज इफ इट हैपेंस then only, or if they are facing a problem on the face, swelling of the face, then only they should go for it, or there is a like RT-PCR test होता है, उस तरह से antifungal test भी clinically available है?
So firstly, all patients are counseled before they are discharged or they are under home care. What are the warning signs to watch out for? Like Dr. Milind mentioned, pain in the eye, swelling of the eye, reduction of vision, nasal discharge, swelling of the face, loosening of the teeth. So all the warning signs are taught to them. That's one. Next, it's also recommended that a careful clinical examination should be done for everybody. There are no shortcuts. So if anyone has any such symptoms, or they've been through a rough patch where a lot of steroids and other medications have been given, they are advised to seek a consultation where a nasal endoscopy is done. With the help of that, you can examine the nose, look for any signs of debris, discharge, and a fungal swab is sent. Now, this is a very simple test, and the report is available in 2 hours. And this is for a KOH mount, where indicated a biopsy or tissue is sent for a fungal culture. But what is new in this is a PCR test. Some labs in Bombay have already launched it, and Kokilaben, we are launching it shortly uh, uh, within this week. So this PCR test, you take scrapings from the nasal mucosa, and it is sent for a PCR examination. So there's a whole gamut of tests. But to summarize, clinical examination, nasal endoscopy, a swab, a culture, combined with imaging. So this whole thing, if you collate, you get an accurate diagnosis, you know the extent of disease if it is there, and your treatment plan is made. So there are no problems in diagnosing it. It's absolutely clear.
सर क्या ये डिजीज कंटेजियस है?
नहीं.
नहीं सर, बिल्कुल नहीं. ये myth, this is something to be told to everybody that आम म्यूकर के स्पोर्ट्स वातावरण में हैं, बाहर और अंदर, वो आपको हानि नहीं करते. ये एक आदमी से दूसरे आदमी को फैलता नहीं है. It's very important to dispel this because there is a panic at times. It is not contagious.
सर इस वक्त पेंडेमिक के टाइम में जब इतनी जोर से ये फंगल इन्फेक्शन भी हो रहा है, तो हाउ equipped is India today and how equipped is Mumbai in particular? How are the hospitals equipped?
I think as far as the surgery is concerned, I think we have the best surgeons, ENT surgeons in Mumbai. No, there is no doubt about it. But I think the only problem we are facing is about the medicines. If we are getting a good medicines, then I don't think there should be any problem. I think Dr. Sanjeev and Dr. Milind should agree with me. Probably almost all the centers and with the best of the best training, all the ENT doctors are absolutely ready to handle any kind of cases. But we want medicines. That is what we want. MEK, I mean, the amphotericin is what we are. The problem is there. Otherwise, I don't think there's any problem to manage.
So surgery-wise, we are all there. I would request Dr. Deshmukh to take this because he has, he's an administrator too. So, sir, please share with us the problem with medication and what's the government doing, because you're on all the panels.
No, the situation in Bombay and Maharashtra in particular is quite different from the rest of Maharashtra. What my task today would be to have a fair, equitable distribution of amphotericin B, that is liposomal. And the quota that the FDA gives to each hospital has been predetermined. It all depends upon the number of patients which are there in the city of Mumbai and the state of Maharashtra. So if the FDA approves the manufacturing of liposomal amphotericin B to a company, a particular company, the quota is allocated by the FDA to each city, to each corporation, and to each state in the entire country. So what happens later on is we have a dashboard right now in the city of Mumbai and state of Maharashtra. The corporation has notified that mucormycosis is a notifiable disease as of now. So what we need to do, each and every nursing home as well as hospital in the city of Mumbai has to access the MCGM portal and upload the data of all the patients suffering from mucormycosis. If the data is collated at the end of the day, what we find right now is today the list is of 235 patients in the city of Mumbai suffering from mucormycosis as reflected on the dashboard. But probably I feel that there are much more patients than 235 in the city. It so happens that a lot of nursing homes, a lot of hospitals do not want to divulge the name of the patients as well as the number of cases. But unless the number of patients is known to the MCGM, we will not be able to allocate amphotericin B injection, which is liposomal. Now, when it comes to allocation and fair distribution and equitable distribution, my job is to ensure at least a day's quota of medicine to each and every patient that is being treated because of my mucormycosis. Now, a situation has arisen that the manufacturing process itself is so complicated with the companies that the raw material which is required, the lipid component, is the same lipid component that is found in the manufacturing of vaccines by Pfizer company. And the only vendor in the entire of manufacturing this lipid component, that is liposomal component, is in Germany, and all the stock of the raw material has been diverted to Pfizer. Hopefully, in the first week of June, I think the raw material supply would ease off, and most of the companies in India would be able to place an order for procuring this raw material. I think the companies would manufacture them in adequate quantity. So as of now, we are almost ready to give 2 doses. That is, one patient requires 6 vials per day on an average for a normal weight patient. We are almost giving a day's quota to each patient in the city of Mumbai. But as you know, there are 200 patients in the city of Mumbai. So calculate 200 into 6 is 1200 vials every day. The quota allotted to each pharmaceutical company is different. The quota allotted to MCGM is different. But very concerning point here is that the number of cases in the city of Mumbai is just 7 to 8. Whatever the quota is allocated by the FDA to the Maharashtra state, we will get not more than 7% of the quota for the city of Mumbai. And that's why a system is in place to allocate equitable distribution of liposomal amphotericin B. I know that liposomal amphotericin B cannot be allocated for 21 days at a stretch, and that's why we are allocating 2 days quota to each patient who gets reflected on the data of MCGM website.
सर एक और प्रश्न था, हाउ लॉन्ग डज दिस ट्रीटमेंट लास्ट? ये म्यूकरमाइकोसिस की जो ट्रीटमेंट है वो कितने दिन तक चलती है बिफोर द पेशेंट कैन बी रिलीज?
As I told you in the beginning, that mucormycosis as a disease has a variety of presentation, and progression in each patient is different. Now, what we need to understand is when you operate, that's not enough, and you need to follow up patient very, very closely. We do check nasal endoscopies almost every 2 to 3 days and see whether there's any new lesion. Every weekly, you have to do CT scans or MRIs as the case may be, and see whatever is cleared is enough and there is no new lesion. If there is a new lesion, you need to take out. Now, by standard, usually 21 to 28 days is the amphotericin B which is given. In some cases where there has been a likelihood of intracranial, we have given 42 days of amphotericin B. Along with that, whether isoconazole or posaconazole, that is continued. And after these 42 days, the oral therapy of posaconazole or isoconazole, as per the physician choice, it continues to about 84 days in total.
काफी लंबा ट्रीटमेंट है.
Yes, yes.
सर डॉक्टर माजदा, हाँ डॉक्टर साहब, अपना जो जैसे कोविड में ब्लड क्लॉटिंग की भी प्रॉब्लम काफी आई थी. इनफैक्ट बहुत सारा ऐसा लग रहा है कि lot of deaths have happened because of blood clots in lungs and in heart or in other places. क्या ब्लड क्लॉट की प्रॉब्लम ब्रेन में भी काफी आती है इन कोविड, और ब्रेन में भी इसकी इफेक्ट होती है म्यूकरमाइकोसिस की? ये कंबाइंड इशू जो चल रहा है, हाउ मच इज द ब्रेन एंड स्पाइन अफेक्टेड बिकॉज ऑफ दिस?
No, it's a significant problem. See, this is a systemic coagulopathy, so it is not going to spare the brain. It is not sparing any part of the body. It is not sparing any organ. So the heart is involved, the peripheral vascular system is involved, lungs are involved. Basically, at the end of the day, the more we are learning about COVID, we are figuring out that it seems to be like a vasculopathy that is eventually leading to everything. And that is why I'm saying that we are seeing patients who are having strokes, who have had no, even who've had asymptomatic COVID and later were found to have COVID antibodies. So this is a problem that is affecting the vasculature across the board. So the brain is definitely involved because of the coagulopathy. We are seeing not only strokes, not only infarcts, but we are also seeing hemorrhage because of COVID. And we are also seeing cortical venous thrombosis. So it's the arterial system that's getting affected and it's the venous system that's getting affected. तो हम दोनों को देख रहे हैं इसके वजह से. Part of it is just COVID related, part of it is mucor related. So even mucor is presenting as isolated stroke, isolated cortical venous thrombosis, etc. So we are not free from it. The nervous, I haven't seen this, I haven't seen vascular involvement of the spinal cord yet, to be honest. But I'm sure in some sense it may be. I mean, those who have more experience, the other teams that see more patients of this particular entity may be able to see if they have had spinal cord involvement. But we haven't seen spinal cord involvement yet. We've seen spinal cord involvement with COVID, for sure. We've seen COVID present with myelitis of the spinal cord. We've seen COVID present with demyelination. We've seen COVID present with neuropathy. We've seen COVID present with Guillain-Barré syndrome. We haven't seen mucor affliction of the spinal cord yet.
सर, ये म्यूकर माइकोसिस की जो प्रॉब्लम आ रही है इंडिया में, ये इंडिया पर ही ज्यादा सीमित है, बाहर भी है लेकिन द क्वांटम इज क्वाइट लेस. कैन समबडी एक्सप्लेन व्हाई? बिकॉज कोविड की जो प्रॉब्लम थी वो वर्ल्ड वाइड है, बट ये म्यूकर माइकोसिस की प्रॉब्लम थोड़ी सी एंडेमिक जैसी इंडिया में ज्यादा है, बाहर शायद काफी कम है. तो व्हाट कुड बी द केस related to this?
There are a few reasons. One is, firstly, it spreads through dust. Okay, the dust is much more here. The bigger problem than this is, see, I deal a lot of patients from interior of Maharashtra. So when I talk to them and I talk to them about their COVID center, who was in charge and who started it. So there are centers where unfortunately a very small practitioners like BMS, DHMS people have been allowed to open the COVID centers at that time. Probably that was the need of the time at that time, but they were allowed to open, and they opened it whether permission, without permission. They have used steroids. I have seen patients where 500 milligram of methylprednisolone 3 times a day, 8 days and 10 days. That is the amount of steroids people have pushed it. And that time the steroid has no restrictions in selling. People are buying on their own, eating on their own, because they know this is what is a line of treatment. And I have seen a center where they have some 18 prescriptions from other good centers, and they just copy that for other patients, admit some 10 to 20 patients, and typically see that some of them are from particular centers coming where they were admitted for COVID. So I see these, and you don't get steroids that easily in any other country. I think that is one of the big reasons in getting this. And what is the cost we are paying? Today, people are losing eyes, losing palates. I have removed eyes and palates of as young as 25 and 29-year-old.
So is the treatment for mucormycosis done only by ENT surgeons, or other surgeons are also involved in that?
It is mainly ENT, but along with ENT, we require ophthalmologists for the eyeball removal. Sometimes we require a plastic surgeon or maxillofacial, but the majority is ENT. I do most of my cases only with the ophthalmologist. Rest of it is head and neck and endoscopic sinus surgery, so that I manage.
Sir, what message would you all would like to share using our digital and print platform today to the viewers? Can we have your message one by one? We can start with Dr. Milind.
Yeah, my message would be very clear that firstly, obviously, use mask, avoid getting COVID. If at all you have COVID and then you have diabetes before the COVID, or has developed diabetes after COVID, then you have to be extra careful using mask. I would suggest that use mask even at home, because I had patient who had undergone a liver transplant, and she clearly told when she got mucor after COVID, she said there was some digging going on in the next door, and she used to keep the window open just for the ventilation and not using mask at home. So even at home, they should be using mask because they are at high level of risk. Secondly, strictly to keep blood sugar under control. And thirdly, if somebody has it, please accept that this is a disease which is seriousness. I get patients where I can see that there is a disease, and he says, no, let me think. After 8 days, I see he come back with the eyeball out or a palate out. So they have to accept that it is the patient and the families have to accept that it is a disease which is very, very serious. So these are the messages from my side, very clear.
Dr. Mohan Joshi.
I think that mucormycosis is a sequelae of COVID disease or the treatment done for the COVID. One has to be very careful. Number one, that avoid injudicious use of steroid, because it has been done by our, highly qualified doctors, as well as even in, so-called as star hospitals or, corporate hospitals. So that has to be avoided. And number three, that it has to do something with hygiene of the people, and therefore it is more common in India than in the Western world. So hygiene, mask, sanitization is very important, and as fast as possible or as soon as you start getting a symptom, you start getting pains similar to sinusitis, you start getting watering of the eyes, redness over the face, discharge which is sometimes very rarely bloody, etc. You have to report to the surgeon, ENT surgeon, physician, etc. immediately, and not to wait. This is what is very important, very, very important.
Dr. Ravi Kiran.
Yeah, definitely. I think whatever Dr. Milind sir and whatever Dr. Mohan sir has said is quite very relevant. The elderly patients or anybody whoever has recovered from COVID, he has to continue using the mask, because that itself will protect from inhaling the dust particle. And apart from that, the regular hygiene of the patient, and what the important thing is sugar monitoring. Diabetes monitoring is very, very important. Although, sometimes it becomes difficult, because we have seen cases that it is just for a short duration the sugar shoots up, and the whole thing's patient's physiology changes, and then he get exposed to mucor. It's a very sudden. But so patient has to be very high alert about all these things, especially if he has slight symptoms of any nose congestion, headache, or some discharge coming from the nose, or tooth pain, anything slightest. If he has a doubt, it's very simple. Just go to a nearest ENT and get a checkup done. A simple checkup is most of the time enough to come to a diagnosis. So being alert is very important.
Dr. Mazda.
I think first of all, your index of suspicion should be very high. Even all atypical symptoms, you should think of COVID unless proved otherwise. Even atypical lesions in the nose, brain, etc., you must think of mucor unless proved otherwise. And treatment should be extremely rapid and extremely aggressive. Uh, that is the main state. You should be very, very aggressive with treating any of these things in the correct fashion, with the correct people and with the correct team. That's it.
Dr. Hemant.
Yeah, I would just add a small line to everybody's talk, that prevention is always better than cure, as everybody knows and everybody's taught since ages. What I mean to say here is prevent COVID in happening to you. That is, always have a surgical mask, not necessarily a branded cloth mask. Always sanitize your hands, and see to it that everybody points out that wear mask whenever you get out of your door, as well as whenever you are inside the door. So avoiding the disease itself is curing the disease.
Thank you, all doctors. Thank you for your valuable insights. I'm sure this would be a very enriching experience for our viewers to listen to the webinar, because this is, as of now, the most current topic, the COVID and the related disease, and this Bucher disease has uh, really made people go under fright, and they are all worried as to what is this kind of problem. So, thank you, doctor, and I would like to use this platform also to slightly explain to you about Navbharat. We have a Hindi and a Marathi publication. Together, we have a circulation of more than 45 lakhs in Maharashtra, and all India inclusive, including Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. Our viewership crosses 1 crore. In addition to that, this interview would be flashed on the Facebook and other digital mediums, and I'm sure people would be very happy to hear expert comments from you all. Thanking all of you. Thank you once again. God bless you.